Thank you very much for joining us on Friday morning's edition of Breakfast Central. I am Osaogie Ogbonwa and would like to welcome you officially as we wrap up the week. For the next 2 hours, as always, we have some of the major conversations happening here in Nigeria, a review of the newspapers, amongst many other things that we will be discussing this morning. And we encourage you, as always, to join us via social media on any of the platforms by simply following at News Central TV. And of course, going ahead to share your thoughts with us. The phone lines will actually also be open at some point this morning. Just before we get into the major conversations we're having this morning, sharing with you what our top stories are. One of the things that has been highlighted in the last 24 hours, is the slight controversy over the Port Harcourt refinery and the claims of its, being brought back to life by the Nigerian government. There have been conflicting reports. The NNPC and, of course, the government and Petron as well, have all, said that the refinery is back fully functional. But, of course, they're stating that it is the old refinery that is that is currently back to life. The one, of course, that has a 60,000 barrel capacity. The new refinery with the 200,000 barrel capacity is still being worked on, according to the federal government and its partners. But there's also conflicting reports that claim that the refinery isn't necessarily back to full production, that is only skeletal workings, that the refinery is able to currently achieve. It doesn't, have the capacity to supply Nigerians petrol. A member of the community, if you have been following from interviews on a sister television station, claimed that he was there as well yesterday, and what he saw was not any evidence that the refineries are back to life or that the refineries have the capacity to, full production of petrol and, of course, supply the Nigerian consumer with petrol in the nearest possible time. And so, it is this clarity that Nigerians are still seeking, because the most important thing with these conversations really is changing helping rather with reducing the price of petrol, the possible reduction in the price of petrol. If the Port Harcourt refinery is fully functional, how much will it be able to supply the Nigerian market with petrol? What price will it be supplying the Nigerian market with petrol? If Dangote refinery has said, that they're reducing to 970 naira per litre, will the NNPC and its marketers or retailers be, if they get petrol from Port Harcourt refinery, be able to sell maybe lower than Dangote refinery, which is a private refinery, or not? These are questions. And of course, will the Dangote 970 naira per litre be the benchmark with which price of petrol is worked with in Nigeria? Or are we going to have a proper review? And this is a thing that I have continuously called for. Before the emergence of the Dangote refinery, if you remember many months ago, there was always the regular explanation of what the landing cost of petrol is, or what the landing cost of petrol should be. But since the emergence of the Dangote refinery, we've not been able to get any clarity as to what exactly is the production cost of petrol that has, warranted a 970 naira per litre figure. And, it's important that the Nigerian government, in all sincerity with the Nigerian people who are still seeking the possibility of buying cheaper petrol, that this Nigerian government is able to answer these questions and let Nigerians know why Dangote is priced at 970 naira per litre. What the NNPC will eventually be selling, what the Port Harcourt refinery will, also, have as its production cost and its, price of petrol when we clarify on, if it's fully functional or not. So these are some of the things that I believe in the next few weeks we will be x-raying and digging deeper at. Yesterday, of course, we had extended conversations about the arrest of the Kogi State Governor, former Kogi State Governor Yahaya Bello, and Nigerians, of course, are still, fingers crossed, waiting till the 10th of December when he will have his bail hearing once again. I'm also joined this morning by my colleague and co-anchor, Olive Emodi.
Thank you very much, Osaogie, for really setting the stage for the conversations this morning. Yes, again, I'm Olive Emodi, and this morning we're going to be having a conversation about the Port Harcourt refinery. So many reactions have trailed it. And you can't completely blame Nigerians for their skepticism that have been displayed towards the announcement of what should have been typically good news. There have also been certain controversial reports about the quantity of petrol. Even though they've come out to say that they're not blending, that it's actually producing. But the quantity of petrol that is being disbursed from the Port Harcourt refinery is also something that is subject to dispute. But we'll be exploring that as well as looking at the controversial tax reform bill that has scaled the second reading. What does this tax reform bill mean? You know, it was kicked against by the Northern Governors Forum, who say that the bill is basically targeted at ensuring that the North might end up being underdeveloped. The proponents of the bill have kicked against this, saying that that's not what the spirit of the bill is. But we'll be exploring what the conversations are like this morning regarding the tax reform bill, also regarding Port Harcourt refinery. And you can let us know what your thoughts are on social media at News Central TV on all platforms. Yeah,
and one of the things that I believe would also come up later, you know, is the Labour Minister saying, I think it's on the Punch newspaper this morning, Labour Minister saying that job creation is not part of his, what's he saying now? It's not part of his mandate.
Oh.
Yes, so it's not part of his mandate. So.
You see, you know why he would say something like that? Again, it goes back to what we've always said on the show, what the KPIs of these ministers are. Yeah. And if when they're coming into the office, they're sure, which is why the new set of ministers, the most recent sets that were screened and nominated and appointed, and I'm optimistic about their delivery, because it would be a shame, because they knew what portfolio they were coming into office with. It goes back to what I've been saying. We need to rejig our format for appointing and screening senators. You can't be screening somebody who's coming for Minister of Labour and Employment that has no background, no dream, no vision for that portfolio. Somebody who maybe will do better in agriculture, or who will do maybe better as a Commissioner of Education. It's why the likes of Adamu back there will say that when he came into office, you know, he had no idea about anything concerning education. It was a round peg in a square peg in a round hole. Yes, there have been scenarios where people who don't have initial backgrounds in that discipline will come and would have big dreams. Some have applauded Festus Keyamo ever since he became the Minister of Aviation, because at the point of his appointment, there were many people who believed that he would underdeliver, because they felt this man doesn't have a background in aviation. We need players in the sector to be appointed. But there are those who say that they've been pleasantly surprised by how he's fared so far. So that's not to say that everybody who must be appointed to a certain portfolio must be an expert there, right? But they need to know what they're coming in for. We need to be sure that at the time when they are grilling them, when they're asking these questions, they're asking portfolio-related questions, not, oh, I mean, when Betta Edu was screened, she wasn't screened for humanitarian affairs. The number of the questions that they were asking her was not in that line, because even her background was in health, not really in humanitarian affairs. So I think that, again, this just highlights the need to re-emphasize that. But that was a very...
So I agree with that, you know, but I think it's also, there are two other key points to make, which, you know, I'm once again going to state. I remember that I mentioned this when the replacements were made with the ministers, the Minister of Education, Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and all that. I feel like it is important, you know, that we are made, you know, aware of the reason that those ministers failed. Again, you know, what made the job difficult for Professor Tahir Maman in the Ministry of Education? And if there are certain factors that made it difficult for him to be able to achieve much,
have those factors changed?
Exactly. Have those factors now been fixed? You know, has anything changed with regards to those factors? And if nothing has changed, then you don't expect anything new from whoever then takes over in those ministries. And it's important. You know, it should not be, you know, overlooked simply because, well, there's been a replacement. So there is that part, you know. And then the second thing, you know, is with regards to the statements from the Labour minister. It brings back the conversation on data and the importance of data. Data gathering is important for policymakers. That's why Nigerians have continuously called for a new population, or a new census, I beg pardon. So we know exactly how many people we're dealing with in different parts of the country. You cannot be guided to make policies if you do not know what the numbers are. Pretty much the same thing with the unemployment figures, you know, being given out by the NBS. Unemployment and inflation figures being put out by the NBS. Because if you see that Nigeria's, you know, unemployment rate is as low as 4.1%, then it maybe doesn't put the government on any, you know, urgency, you know, to make, you know, plans and to ensure that Nigerians get jobs. Because I mean, 4.1%, you know, pretty much better than Canada. pretty much the same thing with the UK and the United States. So there's no urgency with providing jobs for Nigerians. So, the labor minister can make these types of statements because, everybody has jobs. Even if it's not reflecting in any other metric that, you should see that reflection if 96% of Nigerians are employed.
This same labor ministry, is it not the same ministry where the one-time labor minister had said Nigeria did not have an unemployment problem? Was it not the same ministry where, anyway, I'll definitely double check that, but I don't know that Nigerians will take such a statement very calmly or will take that statement with an open heart, because indeed Nigeria is facing very turbulent times. We're looking for more opportunities, and who better to provide employment for or to create opportunities for employment other than the Minister of Labour. But if Minister says that it's not Minister's responsibility, well, I don't know if you ask me who I will ask. Let's share with you what our top stories are this morning, and then we'll bring you breakfast headlines. This morning on Breakfast Central, we'll be looking at the controversial tax reform bill as it scales the second reading. And away from the controversial tax reform bill, we'll also be looking at the Port Harcourt refinery, Nigeria's blast presidency and NNPCL for PH refinery hoax, they call it. Organized labor raises concern over rising child labor. And we'll be talking about this as well as President Macron hosts Tinubu on state visits to France as Port Pigeon. Cute. We'll review the newspaper front pages, having you join us as well. All these and more on Breakfast Central. Now let's bring you breakfast headlines.
Welcome to Breakfast Headlines. The Senate has passed 4 tax reform bills for a second reading aimed at simplifying tax administration and resolving revenue disputes in Nigeria. Leading the debate, Senate Leader Bamidele Okpeyemi emphasized that the reforms would ease the tax burden on low-income earners. However, Senator Ali Ndume urged further consultation, citing concerns about the revenue sharing and VAT clauses. Despite objections, the bills advanced through voice votes. In a separate session, the Senate paid tribute to former Senate President Dr. Joseph Wires during a valedictory ceremony. Senators praised his leadership and national service as his remains lay in state at the National Assembly, draped in the national flag. The chamber described Wires as a symbol of democracy and governance. And Governor Abdullahi Sule of Nasarawa State says the Almajiri system must no longer be allowed to hold Nigeria back. Speaking at a regional conference in Lafia on population dynamics, security, and out-of-school children, Sule called for northern leaders to end the practice, describing it as a time bomb. He emphasized the need for parents to take responsibility for their children, criticizing the practice of sending young kids to beg in the name of Islamic education. Sule highlighted previous failed efforts to address the issue and proposed setting up special schools to rehabilitate Almajiri children in Nasarawa. The event, which was organized by the National Population Commission, revealed Nigeria has over 30 million Almajiri, a global record which calls for urgent reforms. And also in the news, the River State Governor Siminalayi Fubara has announced the implementation of an 85,000 naira minimum wage for state workers, describing what he despite what he describes as efforts by enemies of the state to disrupt funding. Speaking at the 2025 Armed Forces Remembrance Emblem Appeal launch in Port Harcourt, Fubara said the policy has boosted civil servants' pay to between 120,000 and 140,000 naira, bringing much-needed relief. He pledged continued commitments to improving welfare and governing under divine guidance. And the Nigerian Police Force says that its decision to dismiss Police Inspector Edith Udama, attached to the Edo State Police Command for alleged complicity and misconduct in connection with the attempted rape of a 17-year-old female suspect by one of its officers attached to the State Command, is justified. The force's public relations officer, Olumuyiwa Adejobi, says that Udama's dismissal followed an investigation that revealed she had witnessed the alleged rape attempt but refused to report the incident. He says that she allegedly tried to exploit the situation to blackmail and extort money from the officer, who is currently facing trial. And now we head to the east of the continent. In eastern Uganda, landslides have devastated Masugu village with at least 30 people feared dead. Heavy rains have caused widespread flooding with damage and multiple villages affected. Rescue efforts are underway, but the toll is expected to rise. The government has issued a national disaster alert and emergency teams are working to reach stranded motorists. The full extent of the damage is not yet clear, but videos and photographs show significant destruction. And now, 3 teenagers aged between 16 and 19 have resurfaced from Shaft 10, where they had spent several months on the ground. According to the teenagers, while they managed to make their way to safety, they said more illegal miners are still trapped underground. Meanwhile, at least 300 illegal miners appeared at Stilfontein Magistrate Courts yesterday, on charges of trespassing and illegal mining in the country. They were denied bail. However, amid this rescue mission, the mission has not commenced for hundreds of miners who remain in Shaft 11. That's all on Breakfast Headlines. Let's now move back to Breakfast Central and get into our top stories. I am Osalgie Ogbawa.
The Nigerian Labour Congress has raised concerns over the prevalence of child labor in the country. This was as the NLC president with officials of the International Labour Organization met with newsmen in Abuja, the nation's capital, saying there is a need to eradicate the trend. News Central's Emmanuel Bagudu reports.
A meeting with journalists covering the organized labor in Abuja. The meeting centered around several issues important to the organized labor, including social protection of not just Nigerian workers, but the entire citizenry, and the plight of Nigerian children involved in child labor, which the president of the Nigerian Labour Congress says is a sad reality.
And when you talk of child labor, you could classify them further into children that do not have parents, because they have to look for food to eat. I think where the emphasis may be is on children whose parents are alive and who automatically have become the breadwinners of their families. Because if they don't do it, the children will not eat and their parents will not eat.
This party aims to foster a deeper understanding of the issues affecting workers and employers, and to explore ways in which we can work together to promote fair labor practices and improve the overall employment landscape in Nigeria.
The media party also had representatives of the International Labour Organization, the Trade Union Congress, and the Ministry of Labour, all in attendance and accepting full responsibility for the welfare of citizens.
You look at the impact in our economies. The president of the NLC spoke to some of them. You look at the issues with informality. A lot of workers are still trapped in the informal economy where there are decent work deficits.
The burning issue, which is the implementation of the national minimum wage, was also brought to the front burner.
And if on the social date this does not happen, states, these are the things you are supposed to do. And that period has to pass, and for you to find out why they have not done so. I think that's clear. I will not sit down here, of course I know we met yesterday and deliberated on it, but I will not sit down here to say strike is starting A or B. No, that's not what I can say here, because we have to collate state by state activities.
The conversation ended with the Labour correspondents accepting to amplify the efforts made by organized labor to improve the lives of citizens. In Abuja, for News Central, I am Emmanuel Bagudu.
Well, thanks to Emmanuel Bagudu for that report, and of course, these are things that must continue to be highlighted across Nigeria. President Bola Tinubu also mentioned something similar on his trip to France. We're going to get into that in a bit, but
he did mention, he talked about empowering and educating children. If you look at the numbers are not good. 9 out of 10 children in sub-Saharan Africa by the age of 10 cannot read. However, when we talk about child labor, I think that there's a cultural impediment that is sort of fostering child labor. For example, I don't know if it's just Nigeria, but maybe in Africa, the culture of having people come to work for you, come to care for your children, the culture of domestic help.
Yep.
It's why people would import a 15-year-old child and say, oh, we are training the child. But the child is actually coming to work in your house. The child is coming, cleaning, cooking, taking care of the baby, doing menial jobs, really. But the argument, it's now a thin line, because whether you like it or not, these people are under the ages of 18. It is regarded as child labor, but then they would argue with you that, oh, but I'm sending the child to school. Yes, they are working for me, but I'm training them. So just really, I do think that when it comes to the conversations about child labor, there's a huge cultural impediment that we have to confront when it comes to that conversation.
Well, I agree, but I think it's generally because, Nigeria, as a country and, as a state hasn't been able to place utmost value on the children. The governor of Nasarawa State, if you heard in the news this morning, is complaining about the Almajiri system, which has about 30 million, according to, what data shows. Imagine what 30 million children are in any part of the world. So, and think about those figures being Almajiri, and we're talking about people who really don't have homes. They're, focused on the streets. You find them on the streets begging for food, right. 30 million. And so if Nigeria, is able to fix its focus on children and upgrade, the attention and quality of life that it gives to children, maybe we would have less, of these child labor conversations. But we will expand on this, and include the president's statements in France. But President Bola Tinubu's 4 tax reform bills have passed a second reading in the Senate. The bills aim to simplify the tax landscape, reduce the burden on small businesses, and streamline tax collection. The bills propose several key provisions, including exempting Nigerians earning below the minimum wage from pay-as-you-earn, payee deductions, exempting small businesses with annual turnover of 50 million naira or less from paying taxes, and reducing company income tax from 30% to 25% by 2026.
The Senate Committee on Finance is expected to conduct public hearings on the bills involving stakeholders from the National Economic Council, Nigerian Governors Forum, and civil society organizations. The committee has 6 weeks to report back to the Senate for consideration. We're joined this morning by economist and finance expert Bolahon Olojide. Good morning, Mr. Olojide. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good morning. Nice to be on the program.
Good to have you again. I'm sure that you've been able to do some research about the bill, and as an expert from your standpoint, the bill has received some kickback. There's some who would argue that the bill is attempting to ensure that certain parts of the country are not developed. But from your perspective and what you've observed and studied about the bill, talk to us about what you would say are maybe the merits and then the demerits of the bill.
Well, it's been an excellent work, the kind of work that maybe the leadership of that committee would deserve a national award. They've gone through the entire tax system, done a thorough job of reviewing and proposing what they believe or what is believed will lead us in the next direction as far as our taxes are concerned. Of importance are issues around emphasis on ensuring that the people at the lowest rung of the ladder, the burden of taxation. And the people with the lowest capacity to pay are not unduly burdened. Under the former personal income tax, for example, by the time you start earning 300,000 naira, you're already being slapped about 7% taxation on that 300,000. Under the new law, even when you are earning 790,000 naira, you are not paying 1 naira of taxes. Under the prevailing situation, you have a revenue of about 25 is what is from the 5 million is what is protected, shielded from taxation. But now that has been moved from 25 to 50 million. So essentially, the law seems to recognize the fact that, look, with the way the economy is right now, it is important to protect those businesses and individuals at that end of the market and ensure that they are not unduly burdened by taxation and businesses can thrive. There are business-friendly parts to it where the common income tax is going to, drop over a couple of years into the future. It also removed VAT. It expanded the non-VATable profile of products that are there that we have always had, and excludes literally all those products that will constitute a burden onto people with less capacity to pay. Those are great, great initiatives. I think what some of the people, especially some governors, and I saw Mr. Ndume also, and a few others who have been vehement about the rejecting the bill, are saying was that, oh, it might deny their people some revenue because of the distribution. So if you take VAT, there's going to be derivation as part of VAT. In the first instance, derivation is not a bad thing. Derivation should be a challenge to anybody who wants to earn derivation. To say, look, why should they be bringing money that has been generated by other people and come and be sharing it to you? Why? Why don't you make your own economy to also turn the turbines and generate revenue? Why? So anyway, it goes beyond that. What they're essentially saying, if you look at the VAT redistribution, there's a derivative part, which is saying, look, this money should not just be shared based on where it is collected, which could simply be the head offices of corporations. It should also take into account the supply. Where is the items that are generating this VAT? Where are they coming from? That is number one. Number two, where are they being consumed? So there is attribution, an attempt to see that it becomes more equitable, rather than what we hitherto have had, where the head offices of those organizations are the biggest beneficiaries of those VAT income. So I think overall it's a very good job. It may not be exactly perfect, and you're not going to have a perfect situation. As a matter of fact, public policies are not made because they are perfect. They are made because they represent more benefit to the most people. Today, if you provide electricity across Nigeria, generator companies are going to have talent. That explains the nature of public policy. It is not about a perfection. In fact, all those guys that are artisans who have been trained to repair generators will be literally out of job. Yeah.
Well, Ms. Olojede, I know that we would also like to have you expand a little bit further on the challenges that northern leaders, have stated, with the bill. But before that, I want to, ask generally of what our taxation picture really is in Nigeria. There's been many experts, who have said that Nigeria, first of all, needs to make more people capable of even contributing to, the taxing in Nigeria, because if you don't earn anything, your business is barely making any money. There's nothing to contribute. You're just trying to stay alive, first of all. There's also those who, point out the fact that Nigeria needs to be able to, widen its tax net and accommodate more people, make them more taxable, and at the same time be able to bring in more people that are currently existing, millions and millions of people, I believe, that are currently living in Nigeria, doing business in Nigeria, that are not, paying any, taxes in some way or the other. And so do you think that, these bills or the current administration understands, how to go about doing these things?
I believe the current tax law that we are discussing significantly address all those reservations that you have expressed. For example, we talked about, businesses that are struggling, having to pay taxes. The taxes are burdensome. Part of what this bill has done is to say, look, I know that you guys are suffering from multiple taxations. The federal government will come and say, pay this one. The state government will come and say, pay this one. The local government will do the same thing. Opposite my office, we have a parking space to which we have paid the local government. Shortly after, the state government appeared and said, this is supposed to be our own jurisdiction. You need to pay us. That one you paid to the local government was a waste. So all those instances of multiple taxation are at the heart of what this particular bill seek to deal with and reduce the proliferation. There are so many taxes all over the whole place. Narrow it down and create a window where you can just make those payments without having to deal with all the 1001 taxes and all the agencies that will be chasing you all around for taxation. So it makes tax collection easier. It makes the burden lighter. Like I said, on the personal income tax, for example, people who used to pay by virtue of what they were earning, a whole number of them are now totally out of that bracket and they won't have to pay anything on that personal income tax. The same goes for the businesses where the threshold has been raised from minimum of 25 million now to a minimum of 50 million. So it considered the burden and seek to redistribute this burden and also make collection easier and compliance generally with taxation easier. What about a couple of years ago when I had reviewed the personal income tax in the United States, for example, I observed that about 40% of the entire tax is paid by the top 1% earners. So top 1% are paying 40% of what is being collected. Now, in Nigeria, it is not exactly the same. What you have here is that a stratum of the society are the people that are paying the personal income tax, while the people at the top are largely escaping from paying. Maybe you and I that are salaried, before they even give us the salary, they have moved the taxes and they give us the net. There's nothing we can do about that. But you now see by the side, people who are earning in hundreds of millions. Go and check how much some of these people are paying. There has been an analysis of this in this country, even by FRS itself, when it said, look, I know how many Nigerians pay up to this much taxation in an entire year. We had a situation in which someone who was a governor for 8 years, when he was contesting for presidency, and he had to file tax return. When you go and look at the taxes he had paid on that report, you see that he's probably paying less than a teller in a bank. So all those inequalities are part of what this bill seeks to address. If we're able to implement with discipline, it will actually take us to a better destination. I'm not saying it is perfect, and whatever is not perfect in it, you can also correct it over time. But as it is today, it is an excellent departure from where we're coming from.
Okay, if this, we completely get through to the, if this bill completely, gets to the end and officially becomes law, what challenges do you foresee ahead in the implementation of these tax reforms, especially when it comes to enforcement and monitoring?
Well, in the real sense, nobody wants to pay tax. And if they can avoid it, they will try to avoid it. So issues of avoidance will always be there, or even possible attempt to evade taxation. So that will always be a problem. But the authorities in charge of this will have to be more thorough and more disciplined in their approach. There have been issues around corruption as well, involving authorities that are involved. So which means some element of sanitization to improve the environment, so that you know that when the taxman is coming, the issue is not about bribery. It is first about compliance, being able to meet your own obligation. And how these authorities themselves approach these issues will determine largely how successful we will be. And I just hope that as technology is being deployed into that space, we will continue to have an improved and further improved environment for taxation and even for monitoring of enforcement on the part of the authorities that have been charged with this responsibility. So on the collectors, on the payers, on the government, everybody have their roles, and we should play our roles to ensure that the the act, when it becomes an act, will succeed and deliver the right level of revenue to us. A lot of what people are paying in Nigeria is extortion, not even taxation. Somewhere an agency will just show up in your place and ask you for tax, and you say, "Oh, you're asking me for 100." Okay,
and unfortunately,
I don't know.
Ms. Almajiri, and unfortunately, this last thing you just mentioned is pretty common across the country, and many times it doesn't get back to government coffers. On the state level, local government level, these funds don't get back to the government. They end up in private pockets here and there. But in the time that we have left, I want you to, talk about how northern governors can actually benefit, right? If they're given the right information, how can they actually benefit from this new tax laws? In what ways do you think that they maybe need to work so that they can benefit from these tax laws instead, of the pushback that they have against it? And the Auditor General a couple of days ago released a report, showing that it was 197 billion naira fraud in MDAs. He named a few MDAs across, the country in his Auditor General's report. So I also want you to speak on, the fraud that exists in MDAs that never seems to be highlighted or spoken about. Okay, as quickly as possible.
The northern governors have their work cut out for them. For example, where I will use whether you use corporate tax or you use VAT, it requires that you produce. So corporate taxation is paid by organizations that are corporate. So let's have more companies established in those regions. Some of the things that are militating against entrepreneurship in those regions, including things like even insecurity, has to be dealt with. Issues around poverty, because poverty, the level of poverty will determine the disposable income of people to consume, and their ability to consume is part of what will drive location and localization of industry. They must be actively involved in dealing with those matters. Then they have some things that they produce in abundance in that place. The northern government should carefully study that law and see how they can position areas in which they have comparative advantage to benefit from that law. So maybe rather than just be interested in shipping down south commodities and raw food, how about a little bit of value addition? When there is value addition, then you can be a creator of a VAT basis, which will come back to you in terms of derivation. So it is not enough. It is not a place we want to sit forever. To be sitting down in one part and expecting that it is the income from the other part that will be feeding those other places. Support, yes, there will always be support, but we have 36 cylinders in this engine. Let every cylinder be turning to have a powerful motion in this motor called Nigeria. That would be my position on that. Then on people who are stealing, the lot of stealing that is going on in MDA that's been there forever. No. There are actually arguments that the civil servants are probably worse when it comes to issues of corruption than even the politician. We've had situations in which two public officers in Abuja, between the two of them, had over 500 properties in Abuja. How much was their salary? So the fight against corruption must move away, or must shift the weight from catching people after they have stolen. It must move into prevention. So whatever we can do, let's shift 80% of our anti-corruption fight to prevention, and then 20% to curative, when people have already done bad things and they have so much money. To even punish them becomes wahala. So shift the emphasis to prevention, technology, monitoring, the financial system, the internal control, all those things that help us to prevent will be our emphasis.
All right. Well, Almajiri, thank you very much for your very brilliant delivery on these very important topics. So we'd like to have you join us again pretty soon. Have a wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks as well.
Let's now take the conversation away to Port Harcourt, where the restart of the Port Harcourt refinery in Nigeria has been met with both optimism and skepticism. While some quarters hailed the development as a major milestone, some experts and industry insiders have raised concerns about the refinery's viability and profitability. NNPC had said the refinery functions at 70% capacity. However, insiders suggest that it may only reach 40 to 50% of its nameplate capacity, which could limit its ability to meet domestic demand for petroleum products and reduce Nigeria's reliance on imports.
Now, Timothy Mbere, the secretary of the Alesha Community Stakeholders, which is the host community in Rivers State, has alleged that the petroleum products loaded from the newly rehabilitated Port Harcourt refinery were not freshly refined, but products left in the storage tank of the facility in the last 3 years. Despite contradictory accounts and speculations, the Nigerian government and NNPC Limited remain optimistic about the refinery's prospects. Now, joining us is the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC Chair in Petroleum Economics and Management, Institute of Oil and Gas Studies, University of Cape Coast, Professor Wumi Ilidare. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us, Prof.
Good morning. How are you today? Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for your time. I mean, let's first of all, get some clarity with regards the controversy surrounding Port Harcourt refinery. Is it producing? Is it not producing? The Nigerian government says it is. Other, persons, seem to, claim otherwise. What are the things that we must look out for, to confirm if or not, there's full production in Port Harcourt refinery?
Again, thank you, but let me quickly make a correction. I left Ghana about a year ago. I'm now Executive Director of Emmanuel Egbuga Foundation in Abuja. Just thought I will correct that. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, by the way.
Well, thank you. Well, I dress like Ghanaian, so that's even understandable. But again, let me quickly make reference to the PIA. The PIA has 3 institutions: the commercial, the policy, and the regulatory. There are 2 regulatory institutions. You have the Petroleum Authority, who is actually in charge of the downstream. I understand the tendency for people not to trust the government. But I cannot imagine the Petroleum Authority, and I understand it was present there, will witness deception. So I just think the discontent about the government is not nice. So that's what I would say. I can't imagine a commercial institution investing money and coming out to say that the refinery is now producing. And somebody will be saying, no, what they loaded is an old stock. Who's going to buy petroleum that is 3 years old and go and sell it? The authority is the one that can have a final say as to the operationality of the refinery. Second, no refinery can begin operation and go straight to 90%, which is the break-even profitability margin utilization rate. It's going to be steadily rising to that level. So I would suggest investigative journalism and not just latch on to a social media report. We have a regulatory institution that can confirm the product that is coming out of that refinery, whether it is genuine or not genuine. Let us begin to learn. I know you have to earn trust, but I can't imagine the Petroleum Authority latching up with NNPC to deceive the public. I just can't imagine that. But that's just my opinion anyway.
But do you understand the skepticism that Nigerians, a number of Nigerians, and maybe some experts have expressed regarding this, especially if you look at the trajectory of the Port Harcourt refinery and the announcements, the deadlines? They missed, if I'm correct, 6 or 7 deadlines before these recent official announcements. So is there maybe any sense to the skepticism that Nigerians have expressed regarding the controversies that have arisen post the announcement of the refinery now producing fuel?
Oh, certainly, there are 2 sides of any coin. You have people who are optimistic and you have people who are pessimistic. And each of the sides has the reason for taking the position that they take. I'm just explaining the fact with respect to the complexity of a refinery. People have to realize that the refinery in Port Harcourt is the first refinery, the one that is 60,000 barrels per day, is the first refinery in Nigeria. And so the technology is not as modern as other refineries. So you are going to expect some inputs that will be necessary to be able to do the cracking. And the cracking level is not going to be the same thing as the highest cracking level. Refinery has complexity, and the complexity determines the ability to crack crude and have some yield that will be beneficial, either petrol, diesel, or jet fuel. So again, we just have too many people who call themselves experts in Nigeria, and all they do is speculate. Again, I'm going to latch on the power of the Petroleum Authority to sanction the commercial institution, which is NNPC Limited, if they are deceiving or deceptive. And I can't imagine that they will cooperate and say a refinery is producing when it's not producing. Secondly, and it's more or less repeating myself, you cannot start a refinery in 1 week and have 90% utilization rate. There's a process. I can just advise Nigerians to be patient. A marginal benefit is worth celebration, even if you are skeptical about it.
Yeah. I mean, I like, how you've put it, but I also want to know, I mean, the conversations surrounding the refinery are mostly centered around the need for Nigeria to be able to locally produce PMS for the Nigerian market, amongst other, crude oil derivatives, that could also be gotten, but mostly PMS, with Nigerians buy daily, almost daily. And so, I mean, not just producing it, but also producing it at a pricing that Nigerians would, see to be affordable. And so, for you now, I understand that you are not necessarily, working with the NNPC, but what is a time frame, with which you can expect that we would have some information as to the quantity of petrol that will be supplied to the Nigerian market daily from this Port Harcourt refinery, and also a possible pricing that you think would work? I have raised questions as to, with regards to Dangote refinery pegging its price at 917 naira without necessarily sharing what their pricing formula is. So what would you say is a time frame that you find comfortable, and what's a pricing that you believe should be convenient for locally produced petrol?
Well, I wish I have a crystal ball. Nonetheless, I have an expertise to be able to make a forecast.
Yes.
Forecast is expectation based on what I call inputs. It's not the Port Harcourt refinery that is going to meet the domestic need. Nigeria is actually blessed, if I can use the word, to have a 650,000 barrels per day in their backyard. And then Nigeria also have the tools to be able to waive certain things for that refinery to target Nigerian market. So to me, if Dangote refinery can operate between the 90 to 95%, and if the federal government will create incentive, there's nothing wrong in creating incentive, because the multiplier effect in private spending of $1 can have on a nation is far higher than the multiplier effect government spending can do. So the beauty of the Port Harcourt refinery is there's now a competitor, even though it is small, to Dangote in the pricing of petroleum product market to Nigeria. Not only that, the potential that someone could get a license to import petroleum from abroad created another comparative base for the pricing of Dangote refinery, which is the landing cost of import. So if you have 60,000 barrels from NNPC Limited for now, and you have another 50,000 barrels from other places, even though Dangote is still a dominant firm in that market, the pricing of petroleum product for Nigeria will be affected. So what I'm looking at is if government, for example, can take the courage and sell crude to Dangote in Naira so that he will not have to change Naira to dollar to do some of the refinery operating costs. The driver for profitability in a refinery is the acquisition cost of crude. And this is where Nigeria should work hand in hand. And there's reason for government to work hand in hand because the petroleum downstream market in Nigeria is anti-competitive. So you cannot expect the market to determine the price. So it's either going to be a monopoly or a dominant firm that will be the price leader. And this is where Petroleum Authority cannot hold this up. You are not necessarily stopping Dangote from making profit, but you want him to make normal profits. So what is the fair market price for the society? This is the function of the Petroleum Authority if they are competent to do their work.
Yeah, I mean, and this competence must be questioned, and everyone needs to remind them of their responsibility almost every single day if we can. But the point you mentioned now about selling to Dangote in Naira, there's still a price or an international price of petrol, and this has always been the argument that selling to Dangote in Naira doesn't, I mean, what you're simply doing is converting to Naira, so he doesn't have to buy dollar or, get dollars to buy crude. But it's still based on what the international price of crude is. Am I right here? If the Nigerian government is selling to Dangote to pay in Naira, it is still priced on what the international price of crude oil is, right?
Well, the problem I have with that is that you are not being paid the same salary with somebody working in CNN and you are doing the same good job. Are you?
I'm not. Unfortunately, no. I have to speak with my management.
As a professor emeritus in Nigeria, what I was paid as a professor emeritus in Ghana and what I was paid as professor emeritus in the United States.
Yeah.
You have to look at an input of production and charge it on the basis of the ability to pay. And that's what you see with demand and supply. You have the price factor and you have the non-price factor. The non-price factor in Nigeria is not the same thing as the non-price factor in the US. And so if you are going to price petroleum product in Nigeria the way it is priced in the US, you are missing the point. But then, if you are going to price the input that you produce yourself the way they price it in the United States, then you are not going to be able to get the type of price of petroleum that Nigerians can afford based on their income. You see, the non-price factor determines the ability to buy and the ability to sell. And you can't compare apple and oranges. It's a different market, my friend.
Yeah,
and it's a bold step that the government is doing to try to send their proof. Who tells you what the exchange rate is? How much do you pay for bread here? How much do they pay for bread in the United States? And then if Dangote Refinery is able to supply a big portion of the product to Nigerian market at an affordable price, and it is at a high utilization rate, you'll be surprised the pressure on the dollar exchange rate will come down. So that's you cannot use an international model without looking at domestic assumption. You just can't choose it. And by the way, there's a social value and a monetary value in an investment in a society. If you only maximize the monetary value and diminish the social value, you have the type of problem that you have in a nation.
All right.
Again, that's my opinion. There's nothing that says you cannot price your product according to your marginal cost equal to your marginal revenue to maximize your profit.
Okay.
Why did you think LNG is profitable? It's because government gave them incentive. And why can't you do the same thing to Dangote and get the Petroleum Authority to do its job, which is ensuring competitive price of petroleum product in the nation?
Is it maybe time to further the conversation about the role of the private sector? I wanted you to maybe speak to that. We've seen conversations about privatization being in the works. Is that a move that you think will be a positive or a step in the right direction?
And listen, divestment or selling share is part of funding a business. The only problem I have is this. You cannot pass a law and violate it. The federal government cannot determine when to sell NNPC Limited refinery. NNPC Limited is a private liability company, even though the government owns the share. It's not something to decide by the Federal Executive Council. That's why you have a board of directors. You should let the board of directors of NNPC govern NNPC. NNPC must be governed in a way that is apolitical. One of the biggest challenges NNPC Limited has had, despite their competent workforce, is political interference, where government will determine who becomes a general manager, executive director. No, let NNPC function like Saudi Aramco, like Kuwait National Petroleum Corporation, like Petronas, like PDVSA, like Patamina. If I can say that NNPC has as competent workforce as any other national company in Nigeria, except for political interference.
Yeah.
And you even see it when you don't even have a minister of petroleum, substantive. So there's even no flag bearer of the policy institutions, according to PIA. Because I've heard Bayo Donuga said that President Tinubu is not the minister of petroleum. Because you cannot be a minister of petroleum if you are not confirmed by the Senate.
Yeah, well, I mean,
and nobody is actually confirmed in the Senate as a minister of state. That's some of the bad precedent of Olusegun Obasanjo.
So we currently don't have a minister of petroleum.
To the ministers that were confirmed.
So we currently don't have a minister of petroleum. That's what it means.
Well, you have minister of petroleum because you have two people that were confirmed by the Senate, but do they have the authority of the minister?
Well,
Professor Wumi Iledari.
But that's just my opinion.
Yeah,
well, you're not the only one who shared that opinion. We've had a guest on the show as well who said that if we have to have an active minister of petroleum, he has to go through the process that the other ministers have gone through the screening, and then become officially appointed. But then we don't know if
the National Assembly can call him to order. And the National Assembly summon Tinubu to come to the National Assembly.
Of course not.
Well, we don't see that happening.
Why things are not working the way they are supposed to work according to the PIA? Of course not.
Well, Professor Iledari, thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing of your
my opinion.
knowledge and experience. Thank you for your time with us. All right, we've had a number of conversations this morning. Let's run you through the conversations we've had so far and let you know what's coming up next. Controversial tax reform bill scales second reading, and we had our guest join us to talk about what these bills mean and what the challenges ahead might be. And we've just had a conversation about the NNPCL and the presidency being blasted for a PH refinery and some calling it a hoax. Organized labor raises concern over rising child labor. Emmanuel Bagudu did a detailed report on that. Now let's share with you what's coming up next.
Coming up next, President Emmanuel Macron hosts President Tinubu on a state visit to France. Newspaper front pages as well. Let's share with you the major stories making headlines across Nigeria and, of course, our top stories of the week. Welcome back, and now let's take you through the newspapers this morning and share with you the major stories making headlines across Nigeria. We're joined this morning by Owade Ahimie, who, of course, will be reviewing these stories with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We kick off with the Punch newspapers this morning. Lead story there says, minimum wage, labor, states hold last-minute talks ahead Monday strike. NLC mobilizes for total shutdown. States hopeful of beating December 1st deadline. I think it's with regards to certain states that have not been able to start paying the new minimum wage. And I think I'm going to bring back the conversation with Owade this morning about some states, who definitely, there are people who say that states like Lagos should not even be talking about 80,000 or 85. They should be paying, much higher, looking at their earnings as a state. And of course, the very poor states can be struggling with 70,000, 80,000. But, we'll have you speak about that. Port Harcourt refinery controversy surrounds NNPCL's claim on operations. Tinubu seeks France collaboration on food security and education. Job creation, not part of my mandate, says the Labour Minister. It's not a
Let's
business.
not get it twisted.
Yes, nobody should call my name.
Don't stress me.
Don't stress me with job creation.
I'm not around.
Yeah, exactly.
And I tend to agree with him.
Okay.
Let's go.
Tax. Northern senators regroup. Bills scales second reading. NAFDAC mops up fake malaria drugs. Just quickly, money laundering. US-based Nigerian may get 20-year jail term. All right, those are the stories on the Punch.
All right, let's now move to the Daily Times newspaper. On the front page of the Daily Times, President Tinubu calls for increased investment in food security, energy, and education. ECPA's terrorism trial date set. Simon Ekpa, of course, has been generating a number of reactions. Interestingly, I did see the interview we had about him on YouTube, and the comments I was seeing there were a lot of solidarity comments, people saying they should free their prime minister. House confirms Olufemi Oluyede as Army Chief, that's COAS. Bishop T.D. Jakes says, I'm not afraid to die. You recall that whilst he was preaching, I believe on Sunday, there was a bit of an incident that happened on the stage, but thankfully it wasn't dire or complicated. Tax reform bills scale second reading at Senate. IBB, Autumn, Tambuwal, or Abuja land title fees. That's all on the Daily Times. Let's move down to the Daily Independent newspaper.
Just a few of them quickly. Tax reform bills propose new sharing formula, cede 55% to states. We can also find here federal government to begin collection of $300 helicopter landing fee soon. Political action must go beyond protest, says Oshimbajo. And I think also here federal government asks TED Fund to cancel foreign scholarship for academic staff. We're edging closer to stability in food security, says President Tinubu, as he unveils initiative to reduce out-of-school population. All right, just quickly, let's start with the one that you just shared your brief thought on, yes, which is the Labour Minister saying job creation is not part of his mandate, and then we can talk about Port Harcourt refinery and the tax reform bill, amongst other things.
Okay, so let me start with what he says. What's his mandate? His mandate is to ensure that those who are in employment or those who are creating employment for people, which is the labor force, are doing the right thing. His work is not to build the industries or build the sectors that are going to create that, but to create an enabling environment for people to get employed within the system. And also, at the end of the day, where there are issues, deal with them. Things like how much wages are you paying? And so on and so forth, based on the minimum wage complaints that come from workers being either maltreated or mistreated and all. That's the role of this is my opinion, of the Labour Minister. Create jobs in which manner? Is he going to be the one that is going to create the jobs in the health sector? But he's going to create an enabling environment to ensure that when the people come out, they can get access to it by following whether it's recruitment laws or labor laws to put them into the right places and all, and so on and so forth. The Labour Ministry is not the one that is going to build a refinery, or is not the one that is going to build a theater for creatives, or is not the one. He's just going to ensure that the policies that are going to come out from where all these things are being created,
yep.
And the people who are coming out to work in those places, whether it's from university or from high schools or from certifications and all, they have an enabling environment, one, to apply correctly and judiciously, to go through an interview process if that's the case, are you with me, to get employment if they are qualified to get employment, and to make sure that they are being treated in line with the Labour Act. And that's clearly, in my own opinion, I think is what the Labour Ministry is meant to do, and tackle those issues. So when it comes to issues of minimum wage, for instance, yes, it's a responsibility for them to speak and look at it and discuss with the leaders of unions and businesses on how best to manage that process. My opinion.
Should he be, in any way, one of the policymakers, advising the government on, what must be done to even create more job opportunities?
Oh yes, he should.
Should he be bothered if our unemployment, rate?
Oh yes, he should be very bothered, and that's what I'm saying. But he's not the one that is going to create those employment opportunities. He should be bothered when Nigerians are coming out in droves, for either university or from training centers, and there are no jobs for them. So he should continue to speak. What are those other sectors that are supposed to create those enabling environments? Because part of his mandate is also to work with the Ministry of Education and ensure that the curriculum fits into what employers are looking for in the labor market.
I'm glad that you've mentioned that, because if we go back to a few years ago when Chris Ngige, who was the then Minister of Labor and Employment, came under fire for saying that the number of Nigerian youths were unemployable because they lacked, the skill. Yeah. And he, many people really did attack him for that. And you're saying now that the Minister of Labor and Employment should work hand in hand with certain other ministries, for example, like the Ministry of Education, to ensure the curriculum provides, or ensures that the curriculum churns out graduates that are employable. So in that case, where he said that, was he also to blame for saying that? For saying that the youth are unemployable?
Well, so when you make a general statement like that, like the youth are unemployable, are you with me? And that's what I will blame you for. You have to be specific about which areas and which parts of employment they cannot be employed. Let's also remember, it's not just going to a university that makes you employable. Mm-hmm. Do you understand? There are other skills that some of them you would learn when you start to work. And so you find out that some people will go the extra mile, some will get some form of certification, especially in this day of tech where certification and new knowledge is continually changing. So it's also dependent on the person who wants to get employed. And I use myself as an example. Over my 3 decades career, I'm a finance professional from beginning to end. But I've been in finance, I've been in oil and gas, I'm in media today.
Yep.
Have I made myself employable? Oh yes, I've developed the skills that I require, and those are some of the things I say. Getting a university degree or getting a number of certification doesn't mean that you're employable. It doesn't mean that.
So I think another thing again that we want to go back to, something that we talked about when we're starting the show, in the sense that when they come out and make sweeping statements like, oh, it's not my responsibility to do this, Nigerian youth are unemployable because they lack certain skills, should we then review the screening process to ensure that from the jump, because Nigerians are still not going to find this funny, him saying that, because Nigerians are angry, people want employment opportunities. Should we then review the screening process to ensure that at the point of screening, there's an expected job description, where Nigerians know this is what is expected of this person, this is what they are coming to do, they are coming to declare, the same way that the governors and the presidency would let us know their mandates, they are campaigning on a few points agendas, or a few points, on their agenda. We don't have that with the ministers, because a number of times you don't even know what portfolio they're coming to serve in. So is it maybe time for us to consider reviewing their portfolios, and should there be stated KPIs at the point of screening?
So the first part of that is this. This is my opinion, and I always state my opinion clearly. The ministry you are going to lead, and when you look at the minister, are you with me? Take him like you are employing a CEO for a private company. Doesn't necessarily have to be an engineer to run an engineering company. No, he just needs to have the requisite skills. Are you with me? To understand finance, to understand how the work is going to be done, and there are definitely KPIs within the organization before you even employ a CEO. Because when you put out the advert, you are looking for someone who can do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. And it's the same thing. So irrespective of whether you are nominated as a minister, are you with me? For what's it called? A minister, health, and then you're for health. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a doctor. You just have to ensure that first and foremost you are someone who understands managing.
And I agree with you.
Managing what's it called? Because the ministries, let's always remember, the ministries have KPIs that they deliver on, and they should be delivering on a day-to-day basis, on a month-to-month basis, on a quarter-to-quarter basis, on a year-to-year basis.
No, so I agree with you that you don't have to have a background in that.
Let me just okay. So at the end of the day, how do you get into that space and understand that these KPIs are going to be delivered by the workforce that you have been employed to manage? And understanding that and doing those things Are you with me? And ensuring that the ministry meets its KPIs. Those are the major responsibilities. So it's easy for you to come out and say, these are the KPIs that you want. And the KPIs of every ministry aligns with what the administration is looking forward to doing.
Okay, all right, let's move on to it, because I think we'll spend too much time on it. We'll probably bring it back again. Let's talk about the Port Harcourt refinery and the controversy surrounding this refinery. The allegations that they are not actually, fully functional like they claim, or even functional, in any way that they claim. People have said that they are, only selling petrol that they had stored, in tanks for a couple of years.
I was somewhere else this morning, and they brought this up, and I tried as much as possible to avoid speaking about it. You understand? And I'm sure you know, over the last few months, I've tried to avoid speaking about things within the oil sector, because I used to be in the oil sector, and I understand a number of those things. And my feedback, and I'll give you the same feedback I gave to the audience then, is, can we just send a reporter to go and do a proper investigation and ask everybody, and ask and seek how you can get into the Port Harcourt refinery? Because you can't get access, the freedom of access, what's it called, and freedom of information, and go and see, is it working or is it not working? We can't continue to look at the headlines based on one person or based on the other party and say, oh, where is our investigative journalism part of this? Because he said, you said. Yeah. And that's where we are continually doing. One person says, oh, it's propaganda. The other person says, oh, no, it's not propaganda. These are the things that have happened. So go do the investigative journalism and tell Nigerians and film it and show it. Is it working? It's not working. I know that I through some of the people I knew, I got a tour of the Dangote refinery, and I saw the aspect and I saw it run. So that's what we should do. Because if I tell you, how do I know where they got the petrol from or the diesel from?
Well, I mean, and this is, again, I keep talking about trust deficit between people and government, which is aided by, every now and then government statements turning out to not be true. So this is not going to be the first one. It's not strange. So, exactly.
So, let me also plead to your MD. Are you with me on this show?
It's not lack of resources.
Let me plead to send a reporter. You have correspondents in River State. Send them there. We all have a few niches here that we can ask. Can we go see the Port Harcourt refinery and let's see how it's working, and then prove everybody right or wrong? And that way, it is better, so that when we're speaking about it, it's not he said, you said.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if reporters are just going to walk in, but
that effort needs to be made. Yeah, so you need to make that effort to get there.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Let's move away to the Daily Times on the front page, and just to mention to our audience watching, if you'd like to recall and be a part of any of the stories, please remember to call the numbers on your TV screen. Let's talk about Simon Ekpa. His trial date has been set by the Finnish court for May 2025. He does seem to garner a lot of support in some quarters, but there are those, even in the East, who would say that they're very excited and very, willing to cooperate with the Finnish government to ensure that he faces the law. Your thoughts on what the outcomes might be and what the implication of this might be for the Biafra movement? Not the court outcomes. I mean, you can't determine what the court will do, but the outcomes of how his matter is being handled and how, the government, especially in Nigeria, and the movement of the Biafra people will be impacted. But before you speak, let's take Lenin's call. Good morning, Lenin. Thank you for calling. Hello, Lenin.
Yeah, I can hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. Please go ahead with your comment.
Please, I don't want to comment about this. Please, I want to speak for the FCC minister. Please, you should do something for the over people.
Lenin, we're sorry, your audio isn't clear. If you can call back, we'll be glad to take your call and your comment again. All right, so let's talk about who the person we refer to as the self-acclaimed Prime Minister of the Biafra movement, or Biafra Republic, like they say. So talk about Simon Ekpa.
Okay, so first and foremost, me personally, are you with me? I don't want any secession from Nigeria. I think we're better off from an economic perspective, the way we're put together, and that's me. So anybody who is agitating for that, first and foremost, if you're agitating for those kind of things, it's treason within the context of Nigeria. And if Nigeria has officially reported and he's been arrested, I think he was arrested in London, and I guess it's also because of some of the treaties we have with the UK. Now, do they have the evidence to show that he can be proven guilty, which is really what the issue is? And these are the things that need to come out. And I guess in my opinion, I guess for him to have been arrested, there must have been enough, some of the things that were sent, either from Nigeria or from wherever, or working with the Nigerian security system, for him to even get arrested. So, yes, will he go through free and fair trial? Oh, yes, I think he will do. Would they present all the evidence and documentations of all those evidence within the court so that the court can make a decision? Yes, I guess with what they have. Now, so the final decision is based on how both lawyers, are you with me, can express themselves and explain out what they think or what they feel. But what Simon Ekpa, in my own opinion, has been doing is citing Nigerians against Nigeria. For me, it's a treasonable offense.
And his arrest, does it cause a cessation to the IPOB movement?
I don't know. I can't speak to that. Some people have said he's not speaking for IPOB. Some people have said he's not speaking for, in quote, Biafra. Some people have said he's not speaking for the Igbo people. But he has continually maintained that this is what he's doing. Until recently, maybe a year or two ago, and thank God for social media, like we say, that's how he became musical. And a man who runs on, so if you really believe in a cause and you want to push it, yes, I know these days, you say, oh, you don't want the authorities to arrest you or to get killed. Well, then you should be prepared for this kind of things. But Simon Ekpa prepared? I don't know. I think he was. But you should be prepared that you could get arrested, you could get you can be tried, right. and that's where I live it.
Maybe expected, being in Finland might provide some cover. Good morning, Ben. I think he's joining us from Benin. We lost Ben. All right. Quickly, President Tinubu calls for increased investment in food, security, energy, and education, while in France. This has, as well come with its own criticism. First of all, seeing the entourage that joined him in France, the Lagos State Governor, the FCT Minister, the Chief of Staff, a couple other people who were there, and, just generally, on the, bilateral relationship with France, and, what Nigeria would get out of this.
Okay, so let me start, and yes, we're always huge on entourage, which I think we should also be very careful about how we criticize entourage that go for some of these meetings, and Nigeria likes the photo ops. That's why you see a lot of people just walking behind him. But let's also remember that when you're going for all these bilateral and country relations meetings, you need to carry people along, because it's not the federal government will open up that dialogue on a government-to-government basis. On a business-to-business basis, businessmen would open it, like you've seen, based on this relationship. 2 financial institutions have been able to finally open branches in Paris. One yesterday, 2 of them over the last week. And these are the things that we need to also look at. What kind of things are happening? It might be easier now for you to transact with your business counterparts in France, because you have a Nigerian financial institution that is operational there. And these are some of the things. Yeah, the states, are there investment opportunities? Are there people? Are there investors that you can speak to that would bring some form of, whether it's FDIs or FPIs to the state or even the Federal Capital Territory? And these are the things that we need to look at. Now, the other question would always be this: in terms of the entourage that followed the president, are you with me? Do you require all of them? Sometimes you don't. And are there other people who have joined in that musical that are actually supposed to create a relationship to enable businesses to speak and are not being sponsored by the government? That's the real question. So your government entourage should be lean and mean, those who really need to work on the policies and depending on the areas that you are speaking about. And then, of course, you have private sector investors, you have states who are also looking at providing that. And then, if you are the governor of the state, then, of course, the state should be willing to at least pay for you to meet some of these investors. And that's the mindset we should always look at. But like I said, if government is paying, whether it's the state or the federal government that is paying for an entourage of 200 people, I think it's too much. That's my opinion. And if they include private businesses, I think that's completely not the right thing to do.
Okay.
All right. I mean, that would be all that we're looking at. I think there are a few other stories, but I don't know that we have the time to talk about that. But thank you, Ade, for joining us this morning on Breakfast Central.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. We wish you a wonderful
And always
weekend.
a pleasure that I come here every time.
Thank you. All right, we're going to a quick break now. When we come back, we'll look into our other stories. President Tinubu is currently in France. All right, we'll see what that means and what has been going on regarding that. All right, bonjour Nigeria. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is on his first official state visit to Paris. This visit is the first state visit to France by a Nigerian leader in more than 2 decades. President Tinubu and French President Emmanuel Macron participated in the Nigerian-France Business Council meeting yesterday at the LC Palace in a bid to strengthen bilateral relations and foster economic cooperation. France is also said to be seeking stronger relations with English-speaking countries in Africa.
Now, this high-profile visit comes as 2024 half-year foreign trade data highlights France as Nigeria's 6th largest trading partner with a total trade volume at 4.4 trillion naira. At a joint press conference after the high-profile meeting with both leaders, President Tinubu disclosed that Nigeria is committed to enhancing cooperation in key sectors such as food security, energy, solid minerals, education, and defense, highlighting the vast yet largely untapped political potential within Nigeria's agricultural sector. I'm just admiring the pictures. I think I think the president and his wife, look pretty interested in those coats and those. Yes, this picture.
I really like it. It's very interesting to see the president very differently dressed. Typically, we're used to seeing him in.
I'm not sure if it is the first lady that is
influencing him.
No. The one that is. I don't want to say cracking me up, but it's just. It's an interesting picture.
Wait, what's interesting about it? Can you?
It's just interesting. Never mind.
Okay, let's bring in our global affairs analyst this morning, Mr. Collins Nweke. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, how you doing?
Very well. Thanks for joining us, sir.
All right.
Sure.
Okay. Some are taking the president's visit with a pinch of salt. Of course, you would see that whilst there's the cute angles to the French president giving his speech in pidgin English and putting out a pidgin tweet and people awing, and there definitely are those who think that there might be an ulterior motive, especially with the arguments that France or the French are losing their grip on African countries. Is there really an eyelid to be raised here? Is there something to be concerned about?
Well, there are quite a few things. Well, I don't know about being concerned about, but I mean, students of political science would have one or two lessons to learn in, diplomacy, politicking, and, pushing forward your national interest in a very subtle manner. Like Osorege introduced, at the beginning, there is very huge anti-French sentiment in the whole of Africa, particularly in the Francophone African countries where France was their, colonial master. Now, there is a deliberate intentional strategy here by President Emmanuel Macron to redefine its Africa partnership. And so they are looking to Nigeria, and like you mentioned, Olive, they are looking at the Anglophone, English-speaking African countries. Besides Nigeria being the dominant economy in Africa, it also has a very, very strong influence in Africa. And as we speak, President Tinubu of Nigeria is the chairman of ECOWAS. So this is a very, very strategically planned meeting. And let's not forget that, France is on the demand side of this meeting in terms of actually inviting President Tinubu. It also it remains to be seen how this will be reciprocated, because in diplomatic circle, when one takes a state visit, the other is expected to play the so-called return match. So this is all very well thought out. The niceties are there. That is part of those diplomatic protocols. But behind the scenes, I believe that there are quite a number of thorny issues. The ones that divide them, I know there are quite a lot, that unite them. But there are quite a lot of, thorny issues where disagreements have been there for decades. And, it remains to be seen how they navigate all of those terrains.
I mean, former Senator Shehu Sani wrote on X, and I'm going to quote him. It says, improving trade, business, educational, scientific, and cultural relations with France is a welcome development, but we must not be their political or neo-colonial stooge in West Africa. And, I think that, is a seemingly common concern that some people have. But aren't there, benefits that Nigeria can gain from this bilateral relationship with France, improving our, economic relationship and trade between these two countries? Aren't there things that we can, maybe lean towards instead of, just being concerned about being France's stooge in West Africa? Are there positives to this relationship that we maybe should focus on?
Absolutely. There is always positives. And you also have to understand that, Emmanuel Macron is not doing this because he loves Nigeria, perhaps even more than he loves, France is doing it. This is all part of, the national interest of France. But it's up to Nigeria to define its own national interest and push it forward. I mean, at the business meeting of yesterday, it was obvious that President Bola Tinubu of Nigeria is using this opportunity to deepen access to, foreign direct investment, As of last year, which is the latest figure, 2023, French investment in Nigeria is about 10 billion, dollars. Euros, 10 billion, a trillion euros, and that's quite a huge chunk of money. Like you mentioned, also France is, the system. Nigeria is the sixth trading partner of France, and so the ambition is actually, that's for Emmanuel Macron, the ambition is to, get France to be among the first three, and that is in the best interest of Nigeria. Now, how they navigate all of that and the sectors that they choose is very, very important. We know of energy transition that is very, very critical to Nigeria's development. But we also know the disagreement that, both leaders have in that regard. Now, how they navigate all of that in such a way that France achieves at least a huge chunk of its ambition in that regard, and Nigeria achieves is subject to the negotiations that will be kickstarted, during this visit.
Let's look at also what specific areas you've highlighted that it's largely dependent on a number of the specific areas that will be explored. If there are specific areas that come to your mind that you think they should be further expanded on, and maybe I would even want to narrow it down to opportunities like education. Do we see that this would open opportunities to see more opportunities for scholarships maybe, or education in France for Nigerian students? Aside education, I want you to speak to education and then talk about other areas that you think could be further deepened as a result of this visit.
Very spot on question there, Olive. Education is one of the low-hanging fruits that you need, as a country in Nigeria to pluck here without needing a ladder. I say this because, there is already, there are already some sort of, student exchange, not academic exchange between France and Nigeria. And I think young Nigerians and young French people need more of, student exchange, inter-university exchanges, beyond the academics that go on sabbatical on both sides. I believe also that something you can fit into education is R&D, research and development. I think a week or two ago, we were on this station talking about, how data must drive, Nigeria's development. Well, it is done in France. And I believe that there is enough, knowledge and expertise that could be transferred from France to Nigeria in the area of, data science, data management, and the evolving, artificial intelligence. These are the sort of exchanges that could, fall within education. And then also, you look at areas like, cultural diplomacy, where France is known to be, a highly cultured, cultural enthusiast, and Nigeria as well. So they can bring activities in that area within the concept of, university exchanges, particularly one that affect directly the, student-to-student exchanges. So in the area of education, yes, very much, to do. But then, let's not forget also that culture, for instance, artifacts, these are, areas of, naughty concerns in the sense that France is one of those European countries that have carted away many of African, artifacts. The discussion, is ongoing as to how to return them, but also the issue of reparation. How do you compensate Africa, particularly Nigeria in this case, for some of those activities that, took place in the past?
Yeah. All right. Like you mentioned, the French president isn't doing this because he likes Nigeria, in particular. Even if he did work in Nigeria in the French embassy, I believe, when President Tinubu was governor many, many years ago. He's now eventually become French president. At the same time, President Tinubu has also become president. How fate works.
Full circle moment.
Yes, but you want to talk about, what France really could be targeting from Nigeria. There's, of course, what we mentioned earlier, which is using Nigeria as its new, maybe, stooge in West Africa. But aside that, what things could, France be looking to gain from this partnership? What would you expect that President Emmanuel Macron must have calculated to enable and, push for this partnership expansion?
Well, at the heart of this relationship is trade. One will imagine, for instance, that when France pushes for accelerated, development in the area of energy transition, clean energy as opposed to, the use of fuel and all of that, you will imagine that the reason is because France has plans quite a lot of, technology transfer, which is actually bringing their businesses into Nigeria to do that. But Nigeria is rightfully saying, hold on, we are not so fast because, the petrol industry, for instance, supports quite a lot of economic activities in Nigeria. Yes, you can develop, you can transit to clean energy at your own pace, but Nigeria and other African countries, have got to, do that energy transition in their own, at their own pace as well. Now, I believe or imagine that a common ground will be found in the area of, energy mix for Nigeria, because France has done it, and, they stand ready to pump money by way of business, not really favoring Nigeria. Is no subsidy, but creating opportunity for French businesses in the area of bio, mass, and all sorts of other alternative energy sources. I mean, just to leave it at one example.
Okay. As we wrap up the conversation, there are many areas that have been highlighted: education, cultural diplomacy. But let's talk about insecurity. We understand the relationship between France and the Sahel region, and a number of the rejections that were made were because you will hear them argue that France was not able to help them fight insecurity. Is it a conversation that should come up? And do you see France playing a role in Nigeria's fight against insecurity?
Well, there is this French ambition of, using Nigeria as a hub, for its military operations in Africa. And I can imagine that when the senator, talked about using Nigeria as a stool, he may have been inferring that Nigeria should be careful so that, they are not used as, some sort of attack dog, convenient one, for the rest of the world, where, for instance, French base is actually established in Nigeria. What some would say that is far-fetched, but you can't rule it out entirely. Now, in the Sahel region, yes, France has actually been sent packing, and that, as a matter of fact, affects French investment in that region. I believe that I imagine that part of the negotiations that will be, going on is actually helping Nigeria, helping Nigeria in counter-terrorism activities in exchange for Nigerian troops in terms of training them and all of that to, have deeper presence in the Sahel region, simply to protect, I mean, principally to protect French interests in that area. How President Tinubu is going to navigate all of that remains to be seen, but I believe it's something.
And shouldn't that be a little worrying? You know, if we, for example, get into agreements to protect French interests. French interests aren't necessarily Nigeria's interests. We should have no. In fact, the French should not even have interest on that level. You know, in the Sahel region, or in Africa, in the first place. I mean, so shouldn't we be worried? You know that the president. I mean, assuming the president goes on to sign these agreements, you know, because of course Emmanuel Macron knows what he wants to get: protection of French interests in the Sahel region and in the rest of West Africa. Shouldn't that be worrisome for Nigerians?
And also for ECOWAS, because you know how they've been trying to find a middle ground with some of these countries that have already exited the region.
Yeah, well, in diplomacy, give and take, is part of the trade. Now, it depends on what you are given and what you are taking. Now, I would imagine that if there is a credible plan on the table by France to actually help in fighting Boko Haram, banditry, and all of that, and the price to pay for that is the use of Nigerian troops to protect French interests. In diplomacy, you could say that there is a win-win, but that is not to justify the fact that there can't be alternatives. But you see, at this stage, you can't rule anything out. It depends on what you are given and indeed what you are getting in return.
All right. Well, I guess in the coming weeks, months, we will see exactly what this visit will birth and the implication it will have on both countries, as well as the economic community of West African states. Thank you so much, Collins Weke, for joining us.
Always my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us. All right, as we wrap up, I think we're wrapping up with our top story of the week. I'm not going to speak too much about it, but it's definitely the meet and greet between Yahaya Bello and the EFCC and how that has turned out, where initially it was announced as an arrest, but then we then realized that it wasn't really an arrest as it seemed, and that, how it's made a mockery of law enforcement is what is very embarrassing. But that's definitely my top story of the week. I
mean, he was held. He's going to be in their custody till the 10th. You can call it an arrest.
Well,
I believe so.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop the questioning of the credibility of the EFCC to being able to have an airtight case.
Why?
And the criminal justice system. All those questions must still be asked. Why, of course, there was this show of shame for the last couple of months, embarrassing.
And then they're sending out a memo to media saying that, he wasn't arrested. His media team saying he wasn't arrested. As a law-abiding citizen, he submitted himself to the EFCC.
No, he should enjoy the time there, until the 10th.
On the run for how long now?
My top story is definitely going to be the Port Harcourt refinery, and of course, it's mostly to call on the federal government and every concerned party to give, proper clarity to Nigerians. For those who doubt, they have good enough reasons to doubt. Nobody's doubting simply because they don't like Nigeria. They want to know the truth. And that also includes on the pricing for petrol. What defends 979 from Dangote? What is the production cost for petrol in Nigeria? And when are we going to know the truth, basically? It's not just, the government saying this is what it is. Nigerians have doubts, and those doubts must be cleared.
Well, we have to go. Thank you so much for joining us on this month's edition of Breakfast Central. When we're back again, it will be the beginning of the best time of the year. We'll be wishing you a Merry Christmas ahead, because we'll be back again in December. I know it's Friday. Please, if you have to go out and drink, do not drink and drive. Turn up with sense. I am Olive Emodi, and I'll see you in December.
And I am Osalgi Ogbon. See you next week.